Hey man,
Yes, mate. How you doing?
good. How are you? Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday, mate. I think we're at slightly different parts of it, but it's
Yeah,
yeah. How you getting on over there? Good start to it.
not bad. Yeah, it's allergy season, which is kind of not my ideal season, but temperature wise, it's ideal.
Are we? Have I just met a fellow hay fever sufferer here?
Yeah, pretty much.
Sending my deepest condolences to you, mate.
Yeah, it's
I
a
feel your
lot
pain.
of yeah, a lot of prescription stuff to kind of, you know, contact wearing and yeah, all those kind of become tough for a month or two.
Yeah, I had a really good Bruce. Well, what I imagine would have been good if it wasn't for hay fever, but a Bruce Springsteen concert back in 2016, ruined by a nice
Nice.
dose of hay fever. I'll never
That's
forgive it.
singing a beautiful tune to my Jersey roots. Because
Yeah.
that's born and raised. Born Bruce Springsteen was a part of like what was ingrained in me growing up in New Jersey.
Oh, interesting question then. On that note, because he appeals to me. He was just played in the house when I was growing up. My dad was a massive
Mhm.
Bruce Springsteen fan, and I guess that's part of why I like him. Um, but there's a like the nostalgic thread that runs through all of his work, and by extension of that, Gaslight Anthem really appealed to me for that same.
Mhm.
Obviously, they lean on Bruce Springsteen quite a lot. Do you feel a draw to the nostalgic side of that? Is there like that element within you, out of interest?
I would say so, and it's probably for a reason of like when I associated listening to him at the time, and then a lot of that relates to like going down to the shore. My that era was very jam bandish. Like that was kind of when that transition happened, at least in the States. There was like Dave Matthews was kind of about to enter his position, and then like there was different eras kind of colliding at once. And Bruce Springsteen kind of provided like this odd blue collar crossover that had Jersey and New York kind of meshing really well. Because I mean, where I grew up, I was extremely close to having Manhattan accessible and the city accessible. But down the shore, I mean, when I went there, I don't think there was a place that didn't play Bruce Springsteen at the time. So I felt that that was very nostalgic just based on his style of singing and how I saw my parents kind of react to music at the time. And it was very, I mean, I'm kind of jumping into it, but like music was extremely pivotal in like my artistic side very early on and like what my parents listened to, what my family listened to and what my friends listened to all played massive roles into like how I got into a creative side of things.
That's a really interesting segue. You're doing my job for me, Casey.
Yeah, I didn't I like as I said, this is my first go, so I'm like very new to this. Like I've had friends get interviewed for different reasons and like I watched theirs listening like how they went about things. I did some like studying, I guess, like between the episodes that you've done with a ton of talented people and like different paths to how they ended up to where they are, and then like my friends that have been interviewed for various different reasons, how they've gone about it, and yeah, just the key is I just don't want to feel like I'm awkward, I guess, at the end of the day, but I can't hide if I am that.
Mate, if that's how you are in the moment, that's how you are in the moment. There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that at
exactly.
all. I've definitely had
Yeah,
my moments on these. It's a moment in time. It's like a photograph, right? It is what it is.
yeah,
Plenty to be taken from it, whatever we come out with. Jared, Jared Suarez was
yeah,
really keen. He was like, "You've got to speak to Casey," and I was like, "Great." Um, Jared's a stand-up guy. I'm not going to question
absolutely,
that at
yeah.
all. And I, until today, or until about 10 minutes ago, as it goes, I'd been really good. I was like, I'm not even gonna do any back work. I try not to do a lot anyway, because it just helps the conversation go a bit more, kind of, I guess, naturally. But I was like, I'm gonna try not to look at, I'm just gonna go with Jared, go with Jared. I was like, no, I'm gonna just do a quick search, gonna do a quick bit of homework, and all I come up with is that, well, I say that all I've come up with. aside from your involvement in the recent Virginia Dream jersey, that's not
Hmm.
your first rodeo in that respect. There's a Vermont Green project that you've been a part of with Matthew
Yeah.
Wolf,
Hmm.
and what really caught my eye was like the third entry, your Strava profile.
Yeah.
So I went in, and it from the first 4 or 5, maybe 6 activities that I looked at, I get the impression we would have a good old fashioned cockfight in a run.
You caught me at a good time. Like this is definitely like me at my fastest.
Same.
Um, I like, yeah, I'm doing my first road marathon. I'm traditionally like trail oriented. Long distances still are like my favorite, but it's like slow moving, a lot of climbing. Like that was always my preferred style. Um, but I lived out west at that time. So definitely became more obsessive in that regard. When I moved back here, there was kind of just like a little bit less accessibility to those types of runs. So I was like, all right. And like my best friend, and I'm sure I'm going to reference him a couple times along this conversation, Eric, he's a professional runner for Terex, and he's been kind of guiding me on how to now focus on speed and like, being an athlete and post college career. I was like, okay, I have a running lifestyle already in the sport. I might as well pick it up. And that was kind of, but I don't think the blocks that like the runs that you're watching now, I don't think is like a true reflection of like the consistency of how I am as a runner.
Oh yeah, I mean, neither am mine, to be honest. I only talk about it when I'm posting good results, and then after
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
they don't always make it on. They don't always make
yeah.
it on to Strava.
Are you training for anything in particular, or you just kind of
Yeah.
use it as an outlet?
So I've got a half marathon in early June, and later, more in line with your true calling, end of September, a trail event. It's a
Mm.
76K from Sheffield to Manchester through a national park.
Hmm.
96% of it is off road. I've never done anything like that before. It very much won't be about speed. It'll
Yeah,
be
no,
about
that's
getting it
why.
done. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen there. It could be one of those that gets finished at sundown kind of vibe. And
It's when you get to those distances, it's more about like how you are mentally checked in with yourself and like can you, you know, grit out the last 15 miles or I mean, even the last I would say like 10K is still like you look at it and you're like I still got 10K. That
yeah,
when you get to those numbers that didn't feel much in training, but when you put them in the grand scheme of like you've already done 50K and you still have another 40K almost like
yeah. Like, please God, no, no more. Please God.
yeah, yeah.
It's interesting you talk about being mentally checked in because running does bring a lot of that. I know we haven't talked about any of your work yet, but that's the way
Mhm.
these conversations
Yeah.
sometimes go. Yeah, running does bring out a lot of the chinks in my armor, so to speak,
Mhm.
in a way that no other sport has.
Yeah.
I guess it's because it's just you, right? There's no you're accountable for if your body's saying no, the goalposts move a little bit, but
Yeah.
once the mind starts checking out, it can be a bit messy on a run, and it really
Yeah.
does bring it out of me. January, I had a really difficult 15-mile cross country. My mind, I was time traveling. I was going back years, questioning my actions in certain events, questioning whether I've even got what it takes to do X, Y, Z that doesn't even involve running. Really put me through the ringer.
Mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, training. My training buddy, she doesn't kind of take days off, and nothing will show you haven't been doing the work more than running with someone who's been putting in the work, right? And then that
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that brings up more. You're like, oh my god, I'm not even committed. I can't even commit to these schedules and whatever. And then the self talk. It's like no other sport I've played. Running brings up that kind of mental battle. I'm curious to hear how you navigate that, and I'm sure this will bring us back around to being in the creative industry and even your football career at some point as well.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I would say, in like, generally speaking, physical activity has always been my dependent. And I would say, prior to having a career that I'm extremely passionate about, or even knowing my career path, like growing up in sports, playing sports has become like where I've gone to, and like my dependency on it has always kind of existed. But it was extremely apparent after college when I did pick up running and had to like rely on pursuing it for my own reasons, and not being like, well, I play a sport in university and like I committed to it, so I'm going to see it through. Like those commitments kind of didn't exist anymore. So like to mentally be like, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this, and like to keep tying it back to my job. Like my job is staring in front of a screen for upwards of 12 hours a day. I need to not do that and like have something that's not that. So my mental health, it's a double-edged sword. I think the outlet of running is very beneficial, but I also think those gaps in the armor that you were talking about are very apparent when I can't do it. And I think that is something I'm learning as I go. Like, how do I check in with myself in case I'm not able to use those outlets and work for it? And I'm sure I'm going to reference it a couple times, but like, that's when the support group of who you're friends with and your family, like all of those kind of come into play. So I think I've been extremely fortunate to have a well-rounded aspect of how I divvy up my time in these places and utilize those spaces to kind of create the best way I could put my all into each of them and properly get the best out of me as a person, as a partner, as a teammate, as a coworker. Like all those things kind of come full circle if I can figure that out.
On that note of being a co-worker, teammate, and all these roles that you take on, or that that we all have these different roles in our lives, how do you find the switch from the team aspect? You played college football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yep.
right? Yeah. Yeah. How do you find the switch from that mindset to the solitary mindset of the long distance running when you haven't really got a support network
Yeah.
out there?
So I would definitely say there was almost a benefit when I transitioned out of team sports to do running, because I think it became so team sport my whole entire life that when it became an individual thing, I had to be a lot more self check-in, like mentally aware of, hey, am I burning the candle on both ends now? And like when I go out for a run, all of a sudden I'm feeling a little heavier than usual, a little clunkier than usual, and I'm feeling aches and pains that, are something I have to kind of like pay attention to. And I think that team aspect is the two that have a like at first I wasn't aware of how to transition between the two. It was me being very hard on myself of why am I not fast? Why am I not able to do these things yet? But I think when it clicked for me, it was um, coming out of college. It was the first race me and my friend Eric did was a 50K. We kind of just decided on the whim, like, hey, this would be a good challenge. And I early on, I kind of like wheels were falling off. I didn't know how to hydrate. I didn't know how to eat. I was drinking like sludgy lake water, and going the wrong direction on the trail. It was very fitting for going in a little blind. And I think that kind of set the scene of like being willing to work for it. And like, as the older you get, picking up things are harder. New hobbies, new activities, new art forms, like new industries. And that's the same that goes to like transitioning back to work. It's, when even the Virginia Dream job popped up, I'm like, okay, there's an importance that I have to be kind of checked into the scene and make sure what we're doing from a design perspective is innovative but relative to the space. I think the sport right now is in a perfect transition point between fashion and the sport itself, where you can utilize research in both spaces to now make a perfect happy medium. How that pendulum will swing, I don't know. But right now, I think there's a lot of good quality that is holding everyone accountable in the space of bringing their design to the highest level possible, which, to then bring it back to your original question of like, how did I transition between the two? I think it comes down to just holding myself accountable to get the most out of myself. The root of that, I think, brought out the best in my running and then brought out the best in my work at the same time.
That's really interesting that one was playing into the other. I was curious as you were saying, curious as you were answering there. You mentioned use the words working for it, and so yeah, I guess suggesting a work ethic that you carry through into whatever you're doing, be it sport, your role as a creative, anything. How much do you think your roots of your roots of being from New Jersey play into this kind of mentality of graft that you've got? Traditionally blue collar, as you touched on earlier on.
Yeah. I
Bruce
mean,
echoing
it's
through the halls of your house.
Jersey's kind of like New Jersey's kind of an odds and ends place because you definitely have a lot of personalities that swing in such a small state. You know, you have The Sopranos, where it's like the quintessential like Italian American, like over stereotyped, but fabulous show. That's still one of my favorite shows to this day. But it always sounds cliche to a certain degree for a lot of people to talk. But I think the grafting, the hard work, directly impacted by my parents and by my brother. Like watching them growing up, there's a 5-year difference between me and my brother, but like collectively, it was enough that as I got older, I realized, I mean, we are very different in a lot of ways, but the work ethic between him, between my parents, all that was very visible for me to see growing up and pick up. I picked it up in different ways as kind of the younger kid in the family, but as I gotten older and like it kind of transitioned when I left high school because I wasn't the best in high school, but when I transitioned out of that, I realized that personal responsibility of that needs to come into play in order to take those necessary next steps to be a legitimate, well-rounded person and not be a liability.
Yeah, so not being a liability is goal number one, right? It should be goal number one on
Yeah,
anyone's daily list.
yeah,
Anything after that is
everywhere.
anything after that is a win. Just try
Yeah,
not to be a
exactly.
liability today. That mindset and that work ethic that you've picked up from like late teens
Mm.
would have stood you in good stead for the career path you've chosen. It's not one you fall into. Like you actively choose it, and it's
Mhm.
competitive. It's it's one of the most competitive fields out there. So I guess what I will say is that 20 minutes in, I've had you talking about Bruce Springsteen, trail running, and all sorts. So it's only fair we start talking about your work now and how you
Yeah,
got into it.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks for bearing with me. I knew we'd
Yeah,
get
no,
there.
no, it's enjoyable.
We'd get there at some point. Um, so yeah, you've got you're playing through high school, college, and
Mhm.
so to play in college, there's obviously a degree of ability there, which requires a lot of commitment. You're on running alongside that. You've obviously got your creativity that is another outlet. Was it very clear to you at that point that that was the industry you wanted to go into, rather than pursue a
Yeah,
sports
like I
career?
guess industry in terms of like
Or
the
was that even
sport
an option?
realm or
Was
like
it
more
very,
of just
very clear to
design.
you when you were studying that the creative field is the one you're going into?
I would say it was the creative field was very visible to me. Like I did a slight breeze by, but high school kind of highlighted my very visible weaknesses, which is the studying, memorization, like all of those as a basis point of school were not directly the best skill that I had or knew how to work on. So I kind of skirted by high school, realized my strengths were going into college was design. But what I knew what design was in my freshman year, at a local community college I did 2 years at, versus what the path that I ended up taking it to were two different things. So, I mean, I guess it's your call, but like I can kind of talk how, because to me, the design career that I had happened in like two stages. One was kind of like pre, like this is going to sound funny, but like pre Instagram and post Instagram, like
Okay, yeah.
there was a very pivotal point for me where,
It's a great way of
um,
summarizing the world we live in, mate. Pre
yeah,
and post.
it was, and it's now I would say there's like the second Instagram, which I call like the algorithm Instagram, where you all of a sudden your approach to how you posted, to how you put out this content was a totally different approach that you had to do compared to what it used to be. I was very fortunate that when I started posting my designs on Instagram, you didn't have to really push, reels didn't exist. This was in like the border of 2012 to 20. So like you didn't have to do too many hashtags. It was basically just post it. It would kind of just go out into the world and like it would fall into place there. I have a fond memory of going to the computer lab at our university at the time, and I was following this skateboard company called Belief NYC. They're out in Queens, and I did a design a day and posted a design a day for 50 days straight, and that was kind of the start of being like having little care to what I posted. I just went on Illustrator, didn't think about it, posted something within a day, and then kept it moving from there. So I did that for 50 days. And after they kind of posted about me, it basically began my freelance career from there. And then that was kind of the turning point into the post Instagram era. So I knew that breaking point for me made me realize how many different facets of design in particular you can go into, and like the different career paths you can go into for design. I think if there's any young designers listening to this, there may be not, but like I don't know what part in their career they're at. But I think it's important to not pigeonhole yourself too early, which is kind of what happened to me. I think like that benefit was I realized what facet of design I loved, and it was anything that was a physical product. I loved seeing that process come to life. I loved working with the other team members, and that whole process of working with brands, teams was something I got excited about every time. And I mean, it's my 9 to 5 now, so it's still something I'm very fortunate to be doing now as a full-time job. But I had to definitely do some additional work to get there. But, I'm at a very good point in my career where I can say that what I aim for, I have right now.
When you were picked up and that you say that began your freelance career off the back of the 50 posts, 50 days, if I understand that correctly, you're still studying at that point, but the opportunities are arising to pick up some work, right? And then as you've graduated, you're just following that freelance route. Was there any fear involved in that, in pursuing a relatively unstable path, for want of a better word?
I think, yes, to a certain point. Like, I think I was so young that or I wouldn't say so young, because I still, I'm holding on to youth to a certain degree, but I would say I was blissfully unaware. Like, I didn't consider that. I just saw opportunities to like be happy or like excited about what I was posting, and then like it would turn into just someone being like, "Hey, can I buy that?" And then all of a sudden it's like money in my pocket, and like that was kind of how I just dealt with it. But what I did and what I still do is if there's an opportunity, and this is going to actually tie into Vermont Green, like if there's a brand I like, an opportunity, I reach out, start a conversation. I'm money aside, I don't even care if I get paid sometimes. It's just an opportunity that builds a relationship. It's with someone or a brand that I respect, I admire, and want to just be associated with a process. And that was exactly what happened with Vermont Green. Matt Wolf is I think, to me, at least on the forefront. I know there's a ton of background work to be had in those projects, but he is one of probably the more impressive designers I've been, given an opportunity to work with. His past kind of speaks for itself. What he's been associated with here in the States and internationally, jersey wise, is, second to none on some of the, barring maybe Drake, which I don't know if you know of him offhand, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's maybe on a page of his own, but Matt, I think, is one of the elites in this more modern time.
So can you talk me through how that project came about
Yeah,
with
so
Vermont
I
Green?
reached out to, I saw they were starting it. I knew Matt was founding it. We kind of talked briefly, kind of just through like some DMs, just me asking like, hey, how do I, make my portfolio attractive to something like Nike? What do I need to include? What do I need to work through? Like, I was still vetting out how I should show up as a designer. It's designers are interesting because you can't necessarily hide behind a resume with just like your experiences. You have to have something visible, tangible, and then from there your skill set's very out in the open and like exposed, where you could either get critiqued or complimented or however it may be. But so we had a foundation of just touching base. I saw that he was founding this team. I reached out to him and I said, hey, like, is there an opportunity for me to just throw some designs your way, see if something sticks? Would love to kind of be involved in this in some way. And he basically was like, yeah, send me what you want. Just know, like, we're kind of in these early stages, money, we're still figuring out more of how to figure out the team. And I said, hey, it doesn't matter. Like, just talk me through this. What do you need? Like, it kind of just worked out where I knew my relationship with him and what he'd provide me knowledge wise was a lot more important at that time than dollars. I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I didn't have to stress about where that was coming from, because I've kept a 9 to 5 now for almost like the last 8 years. So if that any freelance money to a certain degree is fun money, like in regards of, it's nice if I get it. It's not necessary if I don't. But that was luckily something I could put aside. Matt gave me an open brief of just, this is the palette, this is what the crest looks like. At the time, it didn't release yet. And then just design within those confines, and then design a whole slew of patterns, individual posters, icons, characters, and some stuck, some are back pocketed, and some are still being worked through. So I think that was kind of that short form version of it, but it was definitely back and forth for a few weeks, few months, as they were dealing with probably one of the most hectic times that they could deal with, building a team like that. And especially USL2 is a very interesting construct where you're pulling in university players every year and like trying to figure out where they're living, figuring out wages. Like, I think that's got to be one of the most hectic leagues as owners or facilitators in those in the sport that offers it right now in the States, at least.
So sticking with the work that you produced for Vermont Green there, what out of that body was, I guess, within your comfort zone and skill set, and what did you create that the opportunity had kind of pushed you to? Did the opportunity push you towards any areas of growth, I guess, is what I'm getting at in terms of what you produced?
So I would say that the jersey was the newest thing I was a part of. Early on, it was kind of, I mean, I knew that was what I always wanted to do, but there were so many things that I didn't account for when I do it, imaginary style and just like make a Photoshop mock-up of it. There's so many different elements at play as to like what material are they printing on, what Pantones are you working with, how many details are there, is it screen printed, is it stitched, like all of those things that you don't necessarily put into account. You have to understand, like, the design can't get too detailed because it can't the screens can't reach those details. Like, you have to kind of realize that there's limitations to some designs, at least with when it gets to jersey designs, and you can push it when it comes to like custom things, but more like multi-printed items, you have to kind of take into account how that manufacturing process kind of goes in order. And that's I'm going to probably reference it a couple times, but my job is at a company called Dick's Sporting Goods, and we kind of oversee several brands. But my boss, who's been like a really amazing mentor to me, has kind of taught me now these ins and outs of the manufacturing process. So there was a good lineup of Vermont Green and I working at the same time. I was picking up these manufacturing details, and then that probably just helped me push those boundaries a little bit further. And then when I handed it off to Matt, he basically pulled the colors that they were working with at the time, and then he applied colors to the graphic.
And what was the process from then on? Obviously, some of these designs are selected and then used.
Yeah. So he basically reached out to me like a couple months later, and he's just like, "Hey, like, love this pattern. We're gonna apply it to a jersey." And that was kind of how it worked out. And then there was a couple that were poster designs, and then I think there was a couple that ended up being a ball as well. But it's like I'm still working through designs to him to this day, just because it's like it's a fun thing for me to like step away from what I'm working with sometimes and just like doing things with no direct brief, just like a general brand guideline, and do whatever you want. And I don't care if none stick or all stick. I'll just have fun designing.
It's almost like I guess just keeping the muscles flexed in some respects, right? You like away
Yeah.
from the day job. At the very least, you're keeping yourself sharp by working
Yeah.
on these briefs.
And freelance is good because like why I love freelance is because I'm hired for me. Like, I think sometimes the 9 to 5 job, who the personalities you work with in certain roles that like end up buying the designs you're presenting, you have to be a little bit more of a catch-all and like understanding the market. And like my style doesn't necessarily fit certain markets. It could be a kid's boogie board, I have to be more youthful, or like it could be a yoga mat where I have to maybe be a little bit more detail oriented. That catch all is kind of a little bit more deviating of my style. But when I work with Virginia Dream or Vermont Green or any of the brands that kind of ask me to freelance, they're hiring me for me and like my design process, understanding there may be slight swings to one side or another where they have a certain vision and they trust me to see it through. That's when I kind of try and integrate both my style and their vision, and that's how it comes to be. But that's why I love freelance still. That ability to be myself and like not have to put on a corporate hat per se is still very necessary to feel free.
How does that make you feel in terms of fulfillment? Like you're working on these projects because the people have chosen you. So yeah, I guess on that level alone, what does that bring you in terms of fulfillment and recognition, I guess? And when the designs are selected by sticking with Vermont Green just as an example for now, what are the feelings for you around that when you know that one of your designs is then going to be used and seen by many?
I mean, it's just pure excitement. Like, I think like, yeah, I was listening to a lot of the episodes that you've put out, and the professionals of the sport that you've interviewed. It was interesting to kind of hear at least some of the designers who were coming from like a professional athletic space, how they transitioned. And I think like what I'm going to get at is like, I think I've been in my sport, like my school was a smaller school, Division 3, rarely professional contracts kind of come out of that zone. You're more just loving the sport, and there's really quality players that go through it. But I think there's a lot of people who understand that's their end of that's the highest level that they'll potentially see. Some go on, push further, some give it up entirely, some stay just in like competitive men's leagues or women's leagues beyond it. But I think I understood that I need to focus my energy elsewhere, and the fulfillment that design gives me fills that void that I had in college at that time, and still to a certain degree do. I play like pickup co-ed, anytime I can play soccer or football, like I do. But none of those games give me the same fulfillment or excitement that when I was in school I played. But design now gives me that same process excitement of like, it's a 6 month wait sometimes between, conception and when that ideation and when the physical product comes in. So to then see it hit the shelves, and like Vermont Green had their US Open Cup game and I was watching it on TV, and there was times where I saw 20 people wearing it, and like that to me is awesome. And it's, Vermont in the grand scheme of things, like Burlington area, it's like not big. Like it's not like uh a hub like LA or something. Like these hubs that have like that are centered. I think Portland would be a better example. Like they're centered around their soccer stadium or football stadium. Like Vermont has now this culture that I've been extremely passionate about, the way they've ingrained their absolute love for the game. It's that power of community that kind of comes into play. So seeing all those people wearing that training jersey, or even the goalkeeper kit. Like I never thought people would intentionally buy goalkeeper kits as just like a normal jersey. And I mentioned him before, but Drake even bought it, which was a huge, like, pat on my back. Like I don't take enough time to do that to myself sometimes, but that time I definitely did, because that if he's kind of giving flowers there, that's a sign, I think, of design done well. Subjectivity aside.
Yeah, a sign that you're on the right track in terms of career
Yeah.
choices. At least, yeah.
Yeah,
At
yeah. I
least
think there's a
stick with
little
it.
like, yeah,
Stick
yeah,
with it for one more year at least.
exactly. It's by contract at this point.
You mentioned community there when you were touching on Vermont Green and their kind of ethos, and you've mentioned that a couple of times. And collaboration and community seem to be pillars in whatever it is that you do or whatever you look to do. Why do you think that is? Did I
Sorry,
lose
you
you?
dropped in and out on that last one.
Oh, no worries. So you've mentioned collaboration a few times, community.
Mhm.
That ties in with Vermont Green and their ethos, and it seems to be, well, they seem to be rather community and collaboration. A couple of the pillars of whatever it is you do, you're looking for those within it.
Mhm.
Why is that, do you think?
I mean, you got to speak to everyone. Like, I think that's important. Like, you don't want people to fall through the cracks. You don't want the message to fall through the cracks. And that's what I think both Virginia Dream and Vermont Green, in the most recent works that I've done, both of them hit similar notes in very different ways. I think Vermont Green has this beautiful story, and like they own their story and they follow through with their promises when it comes to like the more environmental impact. Like they're thinking kind of beyond the sport of like, we want to be a great team, but we also want to improve a lot of different facets of beyond the game, and like introducing the community to opportunities to benefit the city itself, or like the sport itself, or introduce maybe lower income people who may not have enough accessibility to the sport. Like all of these opportunities are great to watch, and like that's what I want to be a part of. And like what's important to my design is the areas in which they are at. I want to encapsulate an accessible, legible design that has that, oh, like this is just like a visually nice piece to some people. Other people see like layers to it. And it's whatever you perceive, because I think a lot of design is subjective at the end of the day. Like you can have your justification, and like your design story is extremely critical, but I think there could still be someone who looks at it and just goes like, I don't like purple, and then they put it to the side and never touch it. Like, you could put months of work into it and it comes down to something like that, like I think that like those situations kind of help me at least have a little bit more of like a lighthearted look at it and just design something that I know I've put research into and I know I've put the right um the right frames on to understand those areas that need to kind of come through for the stories.
So does your level of research and input into these pieces kind of defend you against the or critiques and someone that might just say, "Oh, I don't like it. It's not for me. I don't like the color." Like, because
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, you've kind of fortified yourself because you know you've done your due diligence in all areas, I guess.
yeah, like I think there's, and like this is where kind of, I mean, I don't want to speak on the behalf of those designers, but like I think Nike, Adidas, Puma, like there's jersey releases where a lot of people give shtick to the jerseys that come out. And like, granted, there are some divisive jerseys that come out in under those brands, but I also have a sympathetic side of understanding the amount of work and the amount of people that need to approve those designs to get to the point of release. And for all the general public knows, that starting spot could have been visually a lot more appealing. But after all of the over the shoulder designers that had to come into play and change and edit, it could be something totally different. But I always know at the root of it is research and R&D that justifies how they at least got in the general area. So part of me does kind of, I kind of get a little bit separated of like being able to take those critiques and just being like, well, it's fine. Like that's subjective, just don't buy it. And like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But part of me always is like, it's like, I just want everyone to like my stuff. Like, yeah, like and I know that's never going to be the case. That's art's subjective. Like you could put research into it and tons of work into it, but it's the purchaser who gets to choose what they want to make and what they want to buy, and what they want to like.
Yeah, speaking of art, I guess that feels like a good time to focus a little bit more on the Virginia Dream jersey, which is for me very much a work of art.
Yeah,
Can we talk for
yeah,
I thought you might. Yeah, I thought you might. Can we talk
yeah,
through a little bit more about that, the backstory with that, how that all came about with the guys there and the
yeah.
process behind it?
Like, so with this jersey, it was definitely a different. So, I mean, I've been very lucky, and Luke was another one. He actually, I think he reached out to me on Instagram, a couple years back. Um, but he basically, like, I better give this quick to because it'll help lead into, I think, the end of like just knowing we're on the same page and like not needing to check each other too much. Between the three of us, at least, Jared, Lucas, and myself. But he reached out to me. He basically asked for a match day poster at the time. And he was kind of like back and forth on he wanted a crest, but didn't know his zone yet that he kind of wanted to be in, from like a process standpoint. And we kind of worked through like, hey, these are the match day posters, like, and he liked them. And at the time, we just kind of clicked of like, hey, this is the right relationship of how we should build the crest, like design it. So we both committed to designing the crest. And then from there, I think that year and a half ish of like vetting out the process, the conversation between him and I, because him and I have never met in person. We've done all this kind of through email, video chat, phone calls.
Still now.
Yeah, still now. I have intentions of so there could be a potential crossover. My hometown team, that plays in the NPSL now, they could potentially see them in like a later playoff situation if both make it there. So I definitely would be inclined to see both of them play. But I mean, there's going back to like a route, talking about like running and stuff. There's a single trail that connects Pittsburgh, which is where I live currently, all the way down to Washington, D.C. And it's just like this rail trail that's like 300 something miles that would bring it to DC. So I'd considered biking there and like just kind of posting up there for a day or two and then biking home, and just kind of taking like a week at no work and just doing that. But I would love to like, I think a cool flex would be if I went there and like played in one of their matches, and then you have like the designer of the jersey and then the founder of the team playing on the same team. Like it would be like a cool moment, I think. And I mean, I've watched their games and like I don't. It comes back to being the liability thing. There's amazing players on that team, and I definitely don't want to be a liability. But I have to also have confidence in myself. If I roll up, I could definitely like. I wouldn't say I can play if I knew I couldn't.
Yeah. Maybe just 20 minutes at fullback, just to keep you out of trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, center. This essentially like a 10 would be ideal because I know how to run
Yeah, they could just let you off your leash. Just let you off your leash for a
Yeah,
bit.
like no purpose, no like direct guardrails. Just create.
Brilliant. So that's incredible that you've never actually met, but you've created a lot of this work for the club.
Mm-hmm.
Can we walk through the process for the jersey? Brief.
Yeah.
From brief to what starts to go on internally for you, your process through
Mm-hmm.
that.
So when he reached out to me for New Jersey, he kind of mentioned more or less just it was pink, classic. He wanted a stripe of some sort. He didn't know. He liked the thought of the monogram going in there, but didn't know how to like. He was still working through how to position it because I mean, it's tough to kind of like mock it up without the programs that kind of make it a little bit more realistic and tangible. Um, so that was kind of the brief of if we can involve a monogram, great, and then some form of a stripe in one way or another. So we worked through just what that looked like. So I think there was kind of a dual path at the time. My research included how clubs show up with stripes throughout the years. So like not only how they design a stripe once, but how do they change that stripe over a 10-year span? So like PSG, I think is a perfect example of like the foundation of it is the same design every year, but how do they utilize trends? How do they utilize art, graphic, textures, especially when they came into Jordan, like an elephant print, like all those things kind of come into play. So I wanted to create something that has a structure similar in case we do want to continue down a stripe path in the years to come. But we can also have like an artistic side to it of it could be a one-off. The second path, I think that also played a good role is the inspiration board that we were kind of working with. The number set was pulled off of these directions that Real Madrid took kind of in the early to mid to kind of like that golden era of, or what I consider the Galacticos being the golden era of Real Madrid at the time. Their custom numbers had like a lot of uniqueness to it. And at the time there wasn't really much of a FIFA regulation behind numbers, which I kind of like looked into because I was like, why were they able to do that? So it felt fitting that like at least the transition from the first numbers we did with their first jersey in Virginia Dream to the second numbers had like a really nice tie to one another, but was still customized between the two. It was minimal in terms of like how they got customized, but it was still the same nod to the silhouette of the face. And that basically brought together the two of them. I think the gradients is kind of what we've always been working with, which is why I pulled the gradient onto the pattern. And I felt that the pink jersey was the focal point this year, that we can now make it about the stripe, or last year, that we can now make it about a stripe this year, which is pulling those contrast colors in to make it stand out a little bit more.
There's so much that goes into that behind the scenes, like the research and that you're talking about there. I mean, it's almost like understanding a different language, which might sound a bit kind of like grandiose, I don't know, but you're talking about textures and the way
Mm-hmm.
different elements are utilized over a period of time that might, to someone like me, just appear very. I mean, there's like a running joke that whoever designs the Netherlands World Cup kits is got the easiest.
Yeah.
And it's like, Aston Villa or West Ham, or it's like, okay, yeah, it's a claret top with blue sleeves, and there you go, you got the easy gig. But it's not, is it? and PSV, another good example. It's not as kind of cookie cutter with a slight variation as it may seem. There's
Yeah.
there's a designer behind it that is working with nuances that are, yeah, very different, I guess. Just not to the people that don't understand the language of design. Would that
Yeah,
be
I think
accurate?
like it would, because I think like Barcelona is a really good example of like, how can you be different, but like somehow there's been jerseys that they've released that have been extremely trivial amongst those who are passionate about Barcelona. Even something as simple as like slightly changing the hues of the blue and red turned a lot of people up in arms about how that jersey came out. But at the end of the day, I think there's intention behind it, because every jersey every year, I don't think everyone will be on the side. Like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I think on one hand, if you repeat, there is going to be time where people ask for innovation. But then sometimes when you push the innovation, it might be a little too far. But I think without innovation, or the willingness to push innovation, the progress never happens. Like, you have to be willing to miss that mark in order to hit it right on the one swing you can.
How far away is the Virginia Dream jersey as we see it now away from what you were seeing in your mind's eye at that initial stage?
I mean, like in terms of how the process, like how many iterations we went through, or
Yeah, yeah. Like when you see it in your hand, which I'm assuming you
more
have.
just
I'm
like,
assuming you've got it and you wear it out and
mm,
about on a not on a trail run. It's too special for
not the
that.
newest one. I have the old one currently,
Oh,
but
they
I
need
don't
they
have the
need to
new one
step up.
yet.
They need to get that mailed out. They need to step that up.
No,
Jared, if you're listening,
they're getting wins, which is what I care about more right now.
oh yeah, you're a
I
good
support
man.
that. Like, I watch them. I support them. I just like how it looks. And I mean, so like I run the website, or like help run the website, and with the excitement that I had for I mean the flowers that Jared and Lucas deserve, I think was evident in the amount of orders that came in with this most recent jersey. It definitely, I think it doubled, potentially tripled the first jersey,
Wow.
which, I mean, all credit to Lucas and Jared, and the reposts that we got from the larger kind of publishers between Soccer Bible versus, I think all of those kind of benefited the right time. And, this was kind of one of those where I feel like if Soccer Bible posted it and it was maybe 5 years ago, we would have potentially gotten no purchases. Like, the world was potentially a different consumer 5 years ago, where pink could have missed a mark, and like it could have been maybe a little too questionable of, you know, a color that people may not feel comfortable wearing as just like a day to day. But this is kind of where I feel this generation is shifting in soccer, where fashion is kind of integrating more of itself into the sport, where colors are kind of all over the place now. Third jerseys, fourth jerseys are kind of a bespoke for any club that wants to maybe experiment a little bit more with their club's history, or maybe their city. Like, there's more innovation in those spaces, which I think allows you to be a little more loud. But yeah, that's definitely, it was definitely an opportunity between that I think I can't I can't sit here and talk as if I'm the only person who touched that project, because the success of that is directly from Jared and Lucas's hard work in seeing all this through.
But was there a yeah? What was the element of satisfaction like when you've seen the finished article, albeit not in the flesh, but how those on-screen designs materialize and you see that it worked? You know, like as the samples are coming in and coming and going. Is there like
Mm.
are there those moments where you mentioned earlier on you get that satisfaction out of design that you don't get out of playing anymore, for
Mhm.
example? Are you seeing these stages progress and you're like, oh, that actually worked. That came out exactly as we'd hoped.
Yeah, and I think like this jersey in particular was kind of a collection of like how my 9 to 5 has been shaping me, from like an understanding of a brief and hitting things a little bit more on the mark. And then understanding the manufacturing process of like it's getting screen printed, so I have to give these Pantones with it in order to get as close as possible to my intention. But that satisfaction this time around, the satisfaction came from Soccer Bible. The internet's a ruthless place. But I opened up those comments and it was so overwhelmingly positive that I felt like that's a sign that it was good.
Were you just kind of wincing as you open the comments and you're like, oh no, this is actually all right. We're going to keep scrolling through
Yeah,
these.
it
And
was.
then
Yeah, it was like I'm like, oh, please, like, just be like neutral at least, or like at least have the comments be constructive, so I could at least be like, hey, this didn't resonate with people. Like,
yeah.
what didn't resonate? Like, oh, I didn't like the stripe. Like, stripes on kits don't look good. Like something tangible that I can maybe take away instead of just like pulling up a comment being like, this looks like a kid's jersey, or like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, I'm someone who, and like this is directly also from my full-time job, but like freelance is the same way. Like, I just want actionable items and actionable feedback. Like, I'm fine with you calling out my design that I'm presenting you, but if you don't give me something objective that I can fix, I feel that it comes from a place of like a very tunnel vision type perspective, which I don't think is the best for the design, which is I very openly butt heads with people in my process, because I think like when I come with research and then I get met with something a little bit more subjective, I just kind of question like, hey, is this the best perspective to look at it from? Like, we have X, Y, and Z saying this is the way we should go, but why do you want me to explore here? Like, just give me a little bit more substance and I'll explore it. I just want to understand, we're on this end of the spectrum. Why do we go here? And I think that kind of helps
does it,
paint a better picture, at least for those people.
does the confidence to push back like that come from, uh, I guess, what is earned pedigree from your work?
Yeah, it's definitely more of that. I think like the I still don't even feel like I've done too much to like speak on merit alone, but I do put I give myself a lot of credit for, if I don't know that space, I study that space and learn that space and figure out that space and understand who buys it, what colors perform well in that space, the designs that are traditionally there. That's where my confidence comes from more, because I still feel like I'm on my upward trajectory of becoming the best designer that I can, and like working more in important spaces that I hold kind of close. Earlier in my career, I did a contract job at New York Red Bulls. And I kind of wish I could go back to that, knowing what I know now, because I feel like I could provide a lot more to a professional sports team. And I don't know if that's going to be my calling going back or where I go next, but I think the confidence that I have currently is strictly off of my ability to understand what I don't know and like be willing to learn a new space and take in things that I may not be aware of at times. If I don't know it, I'm open to not knowing it, but I also want to know it now. Like, I have that, like, it's almost not like an anxiety, but like I feel bad if I don't know it, like if I'm not like aware of it. So I
It's
want to like
hunger.
overcompensate. Yeah.
It sounds like you've got a hunger to keep growing. You're not kind of just resting on your laurels as based on what you've done. You want to keep pushing your
Yeah.
skill set to new boundaries and seeing where it takes you.
I think that's a good way to put it, because I think like you hit a point where you have a skill set as a designer and like your skill set's there. But how you become a better designer is the understanding of the industry, the briefs, the process, like all of those things then become what you need to get better at in order to round yourself totally as a designer.
That feels like a really natural and philosophical and also inspirational point to wrap up on for anyone in your industry listening. So thanks for that. That made
Yeah,
made my job a lot easier.
yeah.
But one question just to wrap up on though, and I guess it's sticking with your work and Virginia Dream and the success of this particular project. Like where do you go? Does it excite you? Does the prospect of having to um, push on from the success of this one excite you, or is that daunting to you?
Oh, it's always exciting. I'm always I'm always ready for the next thing. I think like the second that project kind of leaves me and it's out in the world, like I'm excited, don't get me wrong, but like now I'm like, all right, what's next? Like I have a very like intense attitude of that process of like, all right, I want to be better now and like do something bigger now and like figure it out. So yeah, definitely excited. I think our next jersey, which is going to be the away kit, is definitely something that's going to build up to a good story and I think a very good visual to it.
Very confident words, mate. Definitely a competitive streak in there that uh,
Yeah,
bodes well for the rest of your design career and your running times. It sounds like they're going to come right down with that
I'm
attitude.
hoping. I'm going for sub 3 this Sunday, so we'll see if that
Oh
that
man,
hits.
that's
Um,
solid. If it doesn't
all
pop
right,
up
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
Strava, if it doesn't pop up, I know it didn't go well.
Yeah. But
Nice one, mate. Mate, I really
yeah.
appreciate. I'm going to let you crack on with your day. I know you've got a lot
Yeah.
more of it to play into than I have, and I'm coasting into the evening now. So, mate, thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed the chat, learning more about you, your work, the kind of ethos behind it. I'm sure there'll be plenty of value in there for designers listening at whatever stage of their career they're at. And yeah, thanks again, mate. Look forward to sharing this.
Yeah, I appreciate you and thankful you reached out and hope to be in touch and maybe if I come across you, we'll catch a run and get some miles in or kilometers.
That sounds good to me, mate. It sounds good to me.
Right.
Take it
Cool.
easy. Good luck
Appreciate it,
for the
man.
weekend.
Take
Bye,
care.
mate.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Bye.